Well, in the last video I showed you how to do the wire netting mechanics for the round container that I'm going to use here. This is a container that I've put in as a liner to my urn, which obviously does not hold water. It is a tin urn. So I'm using pieces from the garden, and I've made sure that the wire netting is as I would like it. So I'm starting off with a plant which is often called bear's breeches, which is acanthus, and you see these sort of acanthus leaves on columns, etc. in architecture. This was plant, I do like plants that remind me of people, and this one will always remind me firstly of my grandmother, who always grew it, but secondly of Lillian, who from Carmarthen Floral Art Club, who actually gave me this particular plant to have in my garden here. So these are the only two flowers. It's a very young plant, and these are the only two flower spikes I had this year. So I'm just putting those upright, 2/3 of the way back in the design, to actually throw the weight backwards a little bit, the one behind the other. Then I have the Aerometallicum, or Marmoratum. This is a plant that I've grown for many, many years, and I brought with me when we moved to Wales. This one reminds me of my first ever floral art teacher, Trixie Beard, who lived opposite us at where we used to live in Pershore. And she always used these and had them and gave me a plant, and I have used them ever since. So putting them into the wire netting, just making them stand there, you do have to remember when using the mesh that you have to leave the stems a little longer than you would if you were arranging in foam. So with the automatic cut that you cut down for foam will make it too short because it won't go down into the water. So I've grouped those to one side of the design and towards the rear, and they are going to give me a little bit of depth over there. And then as a complete contrast, the ivy, which is the Hedera canariensis. This again reminds me of Trixie, who first taught me flower arranging. My father wouldn't have ivy anywhere near the house, but Trixie did, and she had it growing up the front of her house, and I was always able to nip over there and pinch a few leaves. But I do grow it here, but it grows over the garden shed and inside the garden shed and all over the ground round the garden shed, because I don't keep it in check very well. I ought to do more to keep it in check. So just grouping these together in the opposite quarter to the arum leaves. Bringing those down in. Isn't it lovely having the arum leaves through the winter? It's quite a sign that winter is on its way when you see them appear in the ground. And they throw themselves into the ground. Once they've been there a few years, when you go to dig them up, they will be a lot deeper. And it seems to me that the deeper they get, the larger the leaves you get. So the longer you can leave them undisturbed, the better leaf you get. So I'm just put those in the opposite side of the arrangement to the Aerometallicum. Now I want to put a little bit of width in. So I've picked some of the Symphoricarpus. This is Snowberry. This is a pink Snowberry and reminds me of my mother-in-law because this came from her garden. Unfortunately, the birds here get all the berries before I ever see one. I have to be very quick to get the berries. So bringing that in, just making sure that it has hooked into the wire and is actually down into water there. So that is the art of picking when you are arranging in netting, is you cannot make a straight stem come out the sides. You have to have a curve to it. So you do need to make sure that you've got picked from one side of the bush and the opposite side of the bush to get the opposite curves in the foam, not in foam, in the wire netting. So that's the problem with not being able to edit videos, is you will get to see that little glitch because I can't actually edit it out. So coming into the centre, I have picked some of the hydrangea heads. These are probably the last ones, and if I leave these in the water for about an inch of water, they will naturally dry and keep some of their colour, and I'll be able to use them again. This particular one reminds me, again, all plants that remind me of people. This is from a very good friend who came on holiday with us to Cornwall, Lynn from Pershore, and Lynn Izard, and she grew this from a cutting taken whilst we were on holiday in Cornwall together a few years ago, and she gave me the plant, and here it is. It's supposed to be blue. The ones in Cornwall were blue, and we do have an acid soil here, so it should be blue, but I think I've probably planted it in about the only bit of the garden that isn't actually blue. I need that much shorter, so I'm going to take it off quite a lot shorter and just tuck it quite deep into the arrangement. That's better, all against the foam there, so you can just see how we're building up from the outline and into the centre. So another plant that I have is the sage or salvia, and you can see how I've picked a curve deliberately to be able to get a good curve over this side of the arrangement, coming down to link it down to the urn. Sage, this doesn't remind me of anybody, so you get away with that one. But again, making sure they do go down into the water and grouping them this side as a sort of a counterbalance to the very heavy weight of the acanthus at the top, and bringing the width out to echo the width of the other side. When you demonstrate to a flower club, you don't have quite the same problem as you do when you're demonstrating just to an empty room and a camera, because with the flower club we get a bit of feedback and we can tell you a bit of funny stories, etc. But I'm very aware that I need to get on with this and get it done fairly quickly for you. So we also have some of the Caryopteris. This reminds me of Gary, who gave me the plant when we moved to Wales. He got it for me. Jim thought it would be absolutely wonderful. He'd seen it, and Gary provided it for me. I've just moved one of those arum leaves in the actual placing of the thorn in for me. Thank you. So, wonderful purple berries. I don't know whether you can see those, but they have these fabulous colour berries on it, and I just wanted to put a little bit of lightness that side. Making sure I cut it to roughly the right length, but I'm going to have to trim those side pieces off. I'm just going to take out the tips of some of those branches where the berries have gone. The birds don't seem to go for these, which I'm quite pleased about. I'm wondering whether it's the colour. They're not so sure about the purple of the berries. I might turn that round to put it in. That's better. I can see what I'm doing now. See where the wire netting is going in for me. There we go. Fine. And I have one more piece of that. Come in here. The one good thing about using the wire netting is that once you, if something does move and you need to move it, you haven't made great holes like you have when you're learning in floral foam. And I'm sure we've all been there in the early days when you keep putting in and taking out and putting in and taking out, and eventually the whole thing crumbles up on you. doesn't happen with this. And with the wire netting, of course, you have it for a very long period. Once you've made the mechanic for a particular container, it can stay in there. You can actually bleach it or clean it, and you will get that lovely, be able to reuse it and reuse it. So some of the amaranthus, I grew an awful lot of this year, so I have got some in glycerine and I have some dried, and this is a little bit of fresh that is still coming in the garden. The last frost didn't quite take it off for me, but again it gives me a nice curve downwards at the front of the arrangement. And the other, that's the Amaranthus Love Lies Bleeding, Amaranthus caudatus. The upright one that I'm going to put in a moment is called Velvet Curtains, and it is an upright amaranthus. And I'm going to bring that towards the back here. Somebody asked me the difference between wire netting and chicken wire after my last videos, and I will tell you the difference in that chicken wire has a very tiny mesh, about ½ an inch, and that is because chickens are particularly attractive to vermin. So it's to stop the rats getting into your chicken run. They have a very, very tiny hole in the chicken mesh. And if you try and use that for flower arranging, if once it's crumpled up, you can't get any stems in at all because it doesn't crumple into a usable piece. And you get all these great big holes in there. Sorry, great big holes. You don't get great big holes, you haven't got the holes you need. Again, you see, if I got an editor, that would be edited out, because I'm just talking rubbish. But there we are. So one more piece of the amaranthus can just come over into the back there as well. Like so. So you can just see that. I did pick some of the very first of the hazel catkins, which are just starting to show on the trees. Isn't that just a lovely shaped piece, a lovely shaped branch, and with those lovely grey coloured catkins just starting on there. We did have a little bit of a break in the bad weather yesterday, which enabled me to go picking. Don't be afraid just to trim off if you think it's not in quite the right place. And I'm going to trim off again. That's better. And I'll have another piece the other side probably. See what else we've got. That's a nice piece. That's a lovely arch. Just nip that off. And I'll try and wriggle it in there. And again, just trim it up slightly. If I do that, I'm going to lose the best of the catkins. Let's take that one off. Does need another piece just to come out with it. I always remember being shown to that if you're doing competition work and you've cut a piece and it's got a mark where you've cut it off, you can rub a little bit of the bark of the other piece over it and it just dulls down that whitey look. the things that we've learnt that we've almost forgotten, but they come back to mind occasionally. Pieces just go in there for me. Move that one on its way in. So I think there we have it. I want to thank you very much for watching. I know you can barely see me through the flowers, but thank you very much for watching. If you've enjoyed, please do subscribe to my channel. You will then get notifications when I produce a new video. It doesn't cost anything, and if you have enjoyed it, please do so, or like it at least. So thank you very much, and there is just a garden flowers done in wire netting.